Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us. I'm Professor RJ Starr, and today I want to discuss the psychology of rejection sensitivity and the fear of being left out. There is perhaps no wound as quietly powerful and persistently painful as the experience of social rejection. We are, at our core, social creatures, wired for connection, approval, and inclusion. So when that connection is threatened, or worse, denied, something primal awakens in us. The hurt may be invisible, but its consequences are real. For some, this hurt is fleeting. For others, it becomes a defining lens, through which all social interaction is filtered. This is the territory of rejection sensitivity, a psychological disposition rooted in the expectation and perception of rejection, and often deeply entangled with the fear of being left out. While these two experiences are not identical, they are closely related. Rejection sensitivity refers to the tendency to anxiously expect, readily perceive, and overreact to social rejection. The fear of being left out, sometimes manifesting as FOMO, fear of missing out, social exclusion anxiety, or abandonment fear, can be both a symptom and a cause of rejection sensitivity. Together, they form a feedback loop that shapes one's self-esteem, relationships, and emotional well-being. Understanding these dynamics is not merely an academic pursuit. In clinical practice, these patterns appear in clients struggling with depression, social anxiety, borderline personality traits, and attachment insecurities. In everyday life, they quietly influence friendships, workplace dynamics, romantic relationships, and even digital interactions. To explore them thoroughly is to deepen our insight into human vulnerability and resilience. What is rejection sensitivity? Rejection sensitivity, RS, is a cognitive affective processing disposition that leads individuals to anxiously expect and overinterpret social cues as signs of rejection. The term gained prominence through the work of Geraldine Downey and her colleagues in the 1990s, who found that individuals high in RS are more likely to perceive ambiguous social signals as intentional exclusion and to respond with intense emotional distress. Importantly, RS is not just about disliking rejection, it is about expecting it. This expectation becomes a filter, priming individuals to detect the slightest whiff of disapproval and to react with disproportionate emotional pain. Imagine waiting for a friend to text back and feeling a sinking certainty that their silence means you've done something wrong. Or assuming a coworker's lack of eye contact during a meeting confirms that they secretly dislike you. These interpretations may be inaccurate, but for someone high in RS, they feel absolutely true. Research has identified two major subtypes of RS: anxious rejection, sensitivity, and angry rejection sensitivity. The former leads to withdrawal, self-blame, and preemptive distancing. The latter may provoke hostility, lashing out, or sabotaging relationships as a way of controlling or preventing perceived rejection. Both subtypes often lead to a tragic irony. The very behaviors meant to protect the self from rejection end up pushing others away, reinforcing the original fear. Developmental origins, attachment, trauma, and social learning. Rejection sensitivity does not emerge in a vacuum. It often begins in childhood through repeated experiences of exclusion, emotional neglect, criticism, or conditional acceptance. Children who grow up in environments where affection is withdrawn as punishment, or where approval is unpredictable, learn to anxiously monitor for signs of rejection. This early programming is especially powerful within the framework of attachment theory. According to John Bowlby's attachment model, our early relationships form internal working models, templates for how we view ourselves and others in relation to closeness and security. Children with insecure attachment, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized styles, are more likely to develop RS. The anxious attached child, for example, may become hypervigilant to signs of abandonment, while the avoidantly attached child may cope by becoming emotionally distant, only to harbor the same underlying fear. Beyond attachment, traumatic interpersonal experiences, such as bullying, ostracism, or romantic betrayal, can intensify RS in adolescence and adulthood. Neuroscientific studies have even shown that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. This biological overlap underscores why rejection doesn't just hurt feelings in a metaphorical sense. It actually hurts. Cultural and familial factors also play a role. In families or societies where worth is tied to performance, conformity, or obedience, children may internalize the belief that love is conditional. The chronic need to avoid rejection then becomes a survival strategy, even if it limits emotional authenticity. The fear of being left out, a modern epidemic? While rejection sensitivity is an individual trait, the fear of being left out, often labeled as FOMO in popular culture, is increasingly viewed as a widespread social phenomenon. This fear is more than just annoyance at missing an event. It is the distressing belief that one is being excluded from meaningful social connection. It is the emotional cousin of rejection sensitivity and shares many of its psychological roots. In the age of social media, FOMO has taken on new dimensions. Every scroll through Instagram or TikTok is a potential micro-wound, a subtle reminder of the parties we weren't invited to, the lives more exciting than our own, or the friendships that seem closer than ours. This digital surveillance culture reinforces the idea that inclusion equals worthiness, and exclusion equals inadequacy. Psychologically, this fear is driven by two primary needs: the need to belong and the need to matter. Abraham Maslow positioned belongingness right in the middle of his hierarchy of needs, just above safety and just below esteem. To be left out, then, is not just inconvenient. It is a threat to our psychological survival. The phenomenon of social exclusion has also been studied extensively through the lens of ostracism research, particularly by Kip Williams and colleagues. They found that even brief episodes of exclusion, like being left out of a virtual ball-tossing game, can lead to immediate decreases in mood, sense of control, self-esteem, and meaningful existence. These effects were found across cultures, age groups, and even when the exclusion came from computer-generated avatars. Our brains, it seems, are exquisitely tuned to notice exclusion and interpret it as a danger signal. Emotional consequences: anxiety, shame, and hypervigilance. The psychological consequences of RS and exclusion fear are profound and often self-reinforcing. At their core lies a deep emotional wound, the belief that one is unworthy of love, connection, or acceptance. This belief often manifests as social anxiety, where the fear of rejection leads to avoidance of social situations or excessive people-pleasing. RS is also associated with shame-proneness, a personality tendency to interpret negative social feedback as evidence of one's inherent flaws. Unlike guilt, which is tied to specific behaviors, shame implicates the whole self. For someone with RS, a minor oversight or misunderstanding can trigger a shame spiral that leads to isolation, self-loathing, and sometimes depression. Compounding this is a state of hypervigilance, where the individual constantly scans for signs of rejection. While this can be adaptive in environments where exclusion is a real threat, in safe or ambiguous situations it leads to misinterpretation. A friend's late reply becomes confirmation of disinterest. A coworker's busy tone means they're angry. A partner's need for space is read as emotional abandonment. This interpretive bias keeps the rejection cycle alive. Interpersonal consequences, self-sabotage, and emotional overdependence. Ironically, the very people who long most deeply for connection may struggle the most to maintain it. High rejection sensitivity often leads to behaviors that undermine relationships. These include preemptive rejection, rejecting others first to avoid being rejected later; excessive reassurance seeking, constantly asking for validation, which can exhaust partners or friends; emotional reactivity, overreacting to perceived slights, leading to conflict; people-pleasing, abandoning one's own needs to keep others close. Over time, these patterns can create an unstable attachment cycle where relationships are fraught with insecurity, push-pull dynamics, and unmet needs. In romantic relationships, RS is associated with jealousy, fear of abandonment, and dependence. In friendships, it may manifest as hypersensitivity to changes in tone or attention. At work, it can lead to underperformance due to fear of criticism or overperformance to gain approval. Importantly, people high in RS are not inherently needy or fragile. They are often deeply attuned, empathic, and emotionally intelligent. But their relational radar is calibrated to danger, not safety. Unless recalibrated, even the healthiest relationships can feel like emotional minefields. Pathways toward healing, therapeutic approaches. Addressing rejection sensitivity and the fear of exclusion requires a multifaceted therapeutic approach. At its heart is the task of building internal security, a sense of worth and belonging that does not rely on constant external validation. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can be effective in identifying and challenging the automatic thoughts that drive RS. For example, the belief that if someone doesn't respond right away, it means they don't like me, can be replaced with more balanced interpretations. CBT also helps to distinguish between feelings and facts, creating psychological space between perception and reaction. Schema therapy, developed by Jeffrey Young, goes deeper by identifying core maladaptive schemas like abandonment, defectiveness, or unlovability that drive RS. These schemas often stem from early childhood experiences and must be reworked through repeated corrective emotional experiences. Mindfulness-based therapies, including ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, can help individuals observe their emotional pain without becoming fused with it. Learning to sit with the discomfort of potential rejection without reacting impulsively can reduce emotional reactivity and increase relational resilience. Attachment-focused therapy offers another layer of healing. By exploring early attachment wounds and providing a secure therapeutic relationship, clients can begin to internalize a sense of safety and acceptance. This shift often translates into healthier boundaries, increased self-worth, and more secure interpersonal relationships. Finally, group therapy or support groups can be particularly powerful for people with RS. In a safe and structured environment, individuals can test out new relational patterns, receive feedback, and experience inclusion without having to earn it. Reframing rejection, a new narrative. As much as rejection hurts, it can also be a teacher. It forces us to confront our need for approval and to ask hard questions about where our worth comes from. When held gently and examined closely, rejection can invite growth. Rather than seeing rejection as a referendum on our value, we can begin to see it as a mismatch, a redirection, or even a sign of growth. After all, to grow is to change, and to change is to risk outgrowing people, situations, and roles. Not every closed door is a judgment. Sometimes it is a boundary that protects. Moreover, we must remember that not every social event, group, or relationship is meant for us. The fear of being left out often obscures the deeper truth. Sometimes we are not being excluded, we are being redirected towards something more authentic. And sometimes we are not being left out at all. We are simply not the center of someone else's moment. Cultivating self-trust, purpose, and chosen community can help ease this fear. When we know who we are, we don't need every door to be open. We just need to know we are free to walk through the ones that matter. The universal thread. Although rejection sensitivity exists on a spectrum and varies in severity, it touches nearly everyone at some point in life. Whether it's not being picked for a team, being ghosted after a date, or feeling invisible in a crowd, the pain of exclusion echoes the same message: you don't belong. But this is a lie dressed as truth. Belonging is not something we earn. It is something we are wired for. The work of healing is not about becoming worthy of inclusion, but about remembering that we already are. When we understand rejection sensitivity and the fear of being left out, we are better equipped to meet ourselves and others with compassion. In a world where everyone is scanning the room for signs of belonging, perhaps the greatest act of courage is to extend that belonging to someone else first. Not because they earned it, but because they're human. And so are we.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.